Now it's Megyn Kelly time, one of the biggest stars of US broadcasting, host of the brilliant podcast, The Megyn Kelly Show, joins us with her fascinating take on American news and culture. And coming up, Megyn is going to give her verdict on the US lawsuit filed against Prince Andrew by his accuser, Virginia Roberts. But first this week, biggest story stateside in some time. The New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, resigned after 10 years in office after it was found he sexually harassed 11 women, including some of his employees. Yet, in the face of a 165-page investigation based on interviews with 179 people, he still didn't really own up in his half-hearted apology, saying, "In my mind, I've never crossed the line with anyone, but I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn." So, Megyn, wow, what do you make of it all?
Listen, he needed to go. In my mind, he needed to go because he issued an order requiring all of the New York State nursing homes to accept COVID-positive patients, which ultimately led to, directly or indirectly, the death of 15,000 senior citizens, for which he blamed God, he blamed nurses, he blamed the nursing homes, but he never took responsibility. That's what really started to hobble him before the 11 women came along and provided the death knell to his next candidacy, because he was about to run again for a fourth term. However, having said all that, over here they took a lot greater interest in the sexual harassment scandal, I think in part because there were a lot of Democrats tied to that nursing home scandal who didn't want anything to do with an impeachment probe on that and thought this was a nice, clean way to go after him and only him. And the allegations were pretty clear. I mean, 11 women, one of them a young executive assistant who's now gone on the record with her name on camera saying that he grabbed her rear end and held onto it for at least 5 seconds, that he slid his hand underneath her blouse and held her breast. This is her boss. This is the governor of New York, a state trooper who he pulled from the ranks a year before she was even eligible to protect him. You're supposed to be on duty for 3 years before you can work for him. He pulled her after 2, attractive young woman, goes in to protect him. And as he's walking by her in the doors, he's touching her stomach. He's running his finger along her spine. And now he's like, when I go through the doors, I often pat somebody on the back, on the shoulder, on the stomach. We're like, wait, what? Did you say, what? Right? Here's a little pro tip, Dan. When walking through the doorways at GBNews, don't touch anybody's stomach. Male, female, don't do it. And I can guarantee you right now, not a single person watching this show has ever done that at the office.
No
the only
way.
reason he did it is because he appears to have been a serial sexual harasser, maybe even abuser. And now he's basically been forced out of office and is facing potential criminal charges as well.
Yes, and I want to come to them in a moment, but let's just have a look at his unapologetic resignation speech.
I take full responsibility for my actions. I have been too familiar with people. My sense of humor can be insensitive and off-putting. I do hug and kiss people casually, women and men. I have done it all my life. It's who I've been since I can remember. In my mind, I've never crossed the line with anyone. But I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn.
Megyn, that's a man who does not want to lose power and is not going to cope without power.
Let me help you out, Governor Cuomo. When a woman waits for hours on a rope line to meet you, as one of his accusers alleges she did, and you finally get to see her face to face, and she's got the name of her company written on her T-shirt, the line is way before you putting your finger all over the letters on her chest and pressing down one by one on the name of her energy company. Okay? I'll help you out too. You're 64 years old. The line was where it is on that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. That's never been okay. This is a classic deception technique. You admit just a little bit, just what may have actually been seen by other people or caught on camera, but not the whole enchilada, right? The part that really got you in trouble. And of course, there are many other accusers alleging inappropriate things. He doesn't want to let go of power. The only reason he agreed to resign is because the assembly, that's our state legislature, They were finally saying that within weeks, not months, as they'd said on the other possible impeachment probe on the nursing homes, that they were within weeks, they were going to have this impeachment proceeding go forward. And he had no support. So he knew he was going down. And an impeachment trial could have potentially barred him from running for office ever again, and would have involved putting all those women on the stand, one by one, the state trooper, to say this. And, we would have seen for ourselves how credible these women were and are. I think he was afraid of it. Getting a posh job in a big New York law firm for a few million bucks a year as the former governor who says the standards changed. That's easier than once we've seen the women, one after the other, take the stand and say what he allegedly did to them.
So how worried criminally, Megyn, should he be?
Not worried. Perfectly frankly, no, I don't think I'd be worried about that at all. There's one accuser so far, the executive assistant I told you about with Under the Blouse. She's filed a criminal complaint in Albany, New York, where this allegedly took place. And look, the standard is very easy for a misdemeanor sexual assault. I actually looked it up. Class B, that would be the low one, is sexual contact without consent. So, that's pretty easy to prove. The level up is Class A, intentionally and for no legitimate purpose, forcibly touching another person's sexual or intimate parts. But realistically, the DA is not going to bring this case unless he's got some corroboration. If it's just a he said, she said, I doubt he's going to want to do it. And to be perfectly fair to the governor, her allegations haven't been tested. Does he have some sort of a document showing he wasn't actually in the governor's mansion the day this happened, or that she wasn't there? All of those things would have to be bulletproof to bring a case like this against a public figure like him. And the appetite for it's going to be pretty low since he's already basically booted himself out of office.
Now, Megyn, I want you to introduce us to J.D. Vance. He's a fascinating character. I've been hearing more and more about him. First, got to know him because he was the author of The Hillbilly Elegy, which was made into a pretty good movie, I thought. I think it starred Glenn Close. So he found fame. Yeah. And initially, he was a Trump hater. Now he's converted to Trumpism and is appealing to the Make America Great Again base as a candidate for the Ohio Senate. What's his story? What's gone down with him?
Yeah, so it's a U.S. Senate seat. So it's important since the balance right now in the U.S. Senate is 50-50 with our vice president, who's a Democrat, casting the tie vote. So an open seat is coming because a Republican is retiring there. And the question is whether J.D. Vance is going to get the Republican nomination for that seat. Now, there are 5 candidates running. He's one of the top ones, but there's a true Trump loyalist also running who's trying to paint J.D. Vance as a Johnny-come-lately to the Trump train and talking about J.D. Vance as though he sounded more like a never-Trumper. Now, J.D. Vance is like a lot of Republicans in America. He was skeptical of Trump back in 2016. No one had ever seen anything like Trump run for office. He had said a lot of controversial things, and J.D. Vance, who I think is a decent person, called him out on some of those. He wasn't a Trump hater, though. He had a few negative comments about Trump, though. And then he says he evolved on the guy. He says over the next 4 years, especially when I saw what happened with Brett Kavanaugh, our Supreme Court justice, who got accused, I think, really unfairly of several sexual assaults. It was a travesty what happened to Brett Kavanaugh, but he made it on the court because Trump stood by him. Trump didn't withdraw the nomination. J.D. Vance's wife, Usha, who I've met, clerked for Justice Kavanaugh.
Got it.
Anyway, the point is he evolved on Trump, and now he's going around saying, I'm sorry for the bad things I said, which I think is a mistake for him. Just own it. Just say you evolved. Don't try to delete your tweets. Politicians are stupid. But anyway, he's doing that, and he's really trying to curry favor with the MAGA crowd. And I would say he's probably it's either him or this other guy who's going to get it. And I'm at this point, I'd put my money on him.
And I presume he's been cancelled by Hollywood now?
Oh, he already was. They hated Hillbilly Elegy because it tells a sympathetic plight about the white working class in Appalachia, America. And it talks about how, where he grew up, all the babies had soda in their baby bottles. There was no milk. About how he never even understood what it was to sleep in pajamas. He slept in his jeans every night. I did an interview with him when I was at NBC. And literally, Dan, I think it is either my number 1 or number 2 top favorite interview of all time. Wow. You can see it on YouTube if you're so inclined. Just Google Megyn Kelly and J.D. Vance. And it really tugs at your heartstrings what he went through. And it's emblematic of what a lot of the folks in the white working class in America go through with drugs, with mothers who are addicted, with abuse in the family, with serial men coming in and out of the house, just on and on and on in addiction cycles that are really hard to break. And I ended the interview by saying, your sister, who he really loves, is worried that you haven't worked everything out. And he said, I'm not sure I have either, but the book may be a beginning on that.
Beautiful. No, it's a fascinating story indeed. Well, we will keep an eye on that one. But Megyn, another weird moment, you might say a senior moment if you're being charitable, with Joe Biden this week, who ignored the direction of a Secret Service agent trying to direct him to a path leading to the White House. Have a look. Now, Megyn, the reason we talk about this is because this man has the nuclear codes, and that's worrying, right? I mean, he's a nice guy, but is he cognitively with it?
It's truly one of those things like, Grandpa, over here. Here's your soup. Now, I will say, in his defense, it's possible the Secret Service agent in front of him was saying, ignore that nicely paved road that takes you right into the White House. Ignore that road. But that's not really how it looks. And given the sort of life experience we've had with Joe Biden, and certainly since he's taken office, one would think it was another senior moment. It is disturbing. There's a problem with him being quite this old and having this many gaffes. The former White House doctor, when Trump was in there, said this guy needs to take a cognitive test. He's not going to, but I do think this is all evidence that he's going to be forced to live up to his one-term promise.
Now let's return to Megyn Kelly, one of the biggest stars of US broadcasting, host of the Must Listen podcast, The Megyn Kelly Show. And huge news, Megyn, that has having real repercussions for the royal family. It's dominating headlines here, but of course it has a real New York flavour because Virginia Roberts has filed a lawsuit there alleging sexual assault by Prince Andrew when she was just 17. He's named as the only defendant in the civil suit, though Jeffrey Epstein and his former girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell are mentioned frequently throughout. And it was brought under the Child Victims Act, which is a 2019 New York state law that allows victims to temporarily make legal claims of abuse that occurred when they were children, regardless of how long the abuse occurred. Now, we have to stress Prince Andrew has previously denied this, but he's stayed silent so far. So what are the ramifications for Prince Andrew here? Can he ever come to America again? Is there any way he can be forced to testify?
Well, if they effect service on him, then yes, they have an active lawsuit, and he's going to have to either answer the claims or default. If you ignore it altogether, then they could get a default judgment against you. But I have to say, I don't understand why he wouldn't fight it. I understand there's a sort of a joy in piling on when you have somebody with as many privileges as Prince Andrew does when a claim like this comes. But I've looked into Virginia Roberts, Virginia Giuffre, and I've spoken at length with lawyers involved in the case and one who's been accused by her, Alan Dershowitz, a professor now retired or emeritus from Harvard Law. And with all due respect to Virginia, her claims have been all over the board. She's been incredibly inconsistent in her factual assertions. And even just based on what I've read, and I've read pretty much all there is to read, there's enough holes in that case to drive a truck through. I mean, so if this were ever to find its way in front of a jury, a skilled lawyer, which I'm going to assume Prince Andrew would have, would just eviscerate her on cross-examination. There's just so many. I'll just give you one off the top of my head, Dan. She said in an early draft of, I think, a book she was writing, she said she vividly remembers spending her 16th birthday having a party with Jeffrey Epstein. Then it later comes out that she never even met Jeffrey Epstein until she was 17 and allegedly didn't start having sex with men for money until she was older than that, even 18. And if she took sex for money when she was 18, then that would make what she did illegal, right? You understand? So she's just been all over the board in the accusations, and that is not to criticize this young woman, because I will say sexual assault victims can get confused and they're not always perfectly consistent. Just saying as a legal matter, this case is a hot mess.
Well, indeed. But what I don't understand, Megyn, if Andrew has nothing to hide, right? Nothing to hide.
Yeah.
And he's previously pledged to assist any authorities if required. We'll just go and speak to the FBI then. They've offered to come to London. If you've done nothing wrong, mate, what are you worried about?
I'm just going to guess that, let's take a look at his interview in 2019, right? Speaking of hot mess, it was a disaster.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do very well when he's pressed. And I don't know whether that's because he's never pressed, because he's a royal, he's a member of the royal family,
Yeah.
or because he's a liar. I genuinely don't know the answer to that question. But I think as his lawyer, if there's any way of getting him away from people who would put the tough questions to him, I'd probably opt for that too. All along, the same thing has happened. They've asked him for cooperation, the U.S. authorities. He has said he would provide it repeatedly, and then he never does. So we'll see whether the courts can force a different result here. I'm sure he does not want a default judgment against him.
No, indeed. Megyn Kelly, absolutely fascinating as ever. We will speak again next week. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.